How did a single failed attack shake the entire Western strategy and send the French president into chaos? It was an ordinary night over the Crimean Bridge, a quiet breeze, gentle ripples in the water, patrol lights flickering softly. Suddenly, Russian radars picked up an unidentified high-speed boat slicing through the Black Sea darkness. No one knew where it came from, but what was clear, it was loaded with explosives and racing straight for the heart of one of Russia's most fortified symbols. Within moments, alarms blared. Russian defenses did not hesitate. Naval vessels and shore batteries opened fire. In a tense exchange that lasted mere seconds, the bridge withstood the blast, remaining intact against all odds. But this wasn't just about steel and concrete. It was a message war, played out in front of the world. Western involvement was immediately suspected. Details began to emerge. A French reconnaissance plane had been flying nearby, just hours before the attack. This revelation sent shockwaves through Paris. Behind closed doors, President Macron was reported to be gripped by panic, as France's military was suddenly implicated in a high-risk covert operation. For a brief moment, it seemed like a regional incident. But as fingers pointed and rumors swirled, the real stakes became clear. The world was witnessing not just a failed act of sabotage, but a seismic shift in global power games. If you only watch the headlines, you're missing the true consequences and the invisible hands pulling the strings. Let's pull back the curtain and see how one night on the Kerch Strait changed international politics and forced leaders across Europe to rethink their next move. Why is the Crimean Bridge much more than just concrete and steel? Because it stands as one of Russia's most protected and powerful symbols, physically linking Crimea to the Russian mainland and psychologically tying the region's fate to Moscow's will. When the explosion echoed across the Kerch Strait in the dead of night, it sent shockwaves far beyond the water's edge. Russian security was supposed to be airtight here, making any successful attack nearly unthinkable. Yet, despite the tight cordon of patrol boats, radar, and air defenses, the unthinkable happened. As dawn broke, details began to emerge that shattered any illusion of a random act. Investigations pointed to a meticulously coordinated assault, possibly directed through Western satellite communication links, and not the work of a lone saboteur. The operation's true aim was not to destroy the bridge, but to pierce the aura of invulnerability that Russia projects over Crimea. This was a message. If Russia's best-guarded icon could be threatened, nowhere was truly safe. And misreading this signal, or underestimating the bridge's deeper significance, risked ignoring the broader strategic and psychological earthquake the attack set off. But the real drama was only beginning, unraveling in the hours after the explosions faded, when evidence of Western involvement began to surface. What followed was not just a scramble for explanations, but a crisis that reached the highest levels of Western governments, especially in France, where panic quickly replaced bravado. What happens when a secret operation turns into a diplomatic disaster? In the aftermath of the failed strike on the Crimean Bridge, a new storm erupted far from the Black Sea, in the heart of Paris. Russian intelligence revealed that a French surveillance aircraft had been spotted operating near Crimea just hours before the attack. This single fact sent shockwaves through the Élysée Palace. Suddenly, French President Emmanuel Macron and his government faced an avalanche of internal accusations and relentless media scrutiny. Who authorized the mission? Who handed critical intelligence to Ukraine? In the corridors of power, unity gave way to panic and blame. The fallout quickly spilled beyond France. In Brussels, NATO officials were forced to acknowledge that the alliance had indeed been involved, if only indirectly. What was meant to be a deniable operation became public knowledge, fracturing trust within the Western camp and igniting fierce debates about the limits of support to Kiev. Moscow seized the narrative. Russian officials no longer referred to the incident as a rogue Ukrainian act, but as direct NATO participation in an attack on Russian territory. Overnight, the diplomatic crisis grew even deeper, as Russia's interpretation raised the stakes for every Western nation involved. The price of exposure was steep. France risked its reputation and credibility, while NATO's unity cracked under pressure. With alliances suddenly on shaky ground, and the world's media watching every move, it was clear. This was no longer just about Ukraine. The rules of engagement had been reshaped, and the next moves could change the entire conflict. As French officials scrambled to contain the political fallout, Moscow wasted no time in launching its own counterstrike, one that would force the West to reconsider just how far Russia was willing to go. When your plan backfires, who really pays the price? Within hours of the failed strike on the Crimean Bridge, Russia launched a wave of devastating precision attacks. Ukrainian command centers and drone bases were obliterated, revealing not only the reach of Russian missiles, but also a showcase of new military technologies in action. President Putin did not mince words. Calm yet unmistakably resolute, he announced that any attacks, regardless of their origin, would trigger a global response. No longer bound by geography, Russia's warning sent shockwaves across the world. In Western capitals, nerves frayed. Paris and Brussels scrambled to enact emergency security protocols. French officials faced internal panic as accusations flew over intelligence leaks and covert support, with NATO headquarters urgently reviewing flight plans for reconnaissance missions. For the first time in years, the illusion of safety in Europe was shattered. Yet the intended destabilization of Russia simply did not happen. Instead, the nation rallied with fresh unity and confidence. Rather than spreading fear, the attack galvanized Russian resolve. Overnight, the Kremlin went from defense to dominance, dictating new rules of engagement as Western leaders weighed the risks of further escalation. For Western powers, the stakes had never been higher. Every new measure risked spiraling into unintended war, eroding their deterrence and exposing cracks within their own alliances. The lesson was clear. Information warfare and miscalculation could upend the global balance in a matter of hours. But what practical lessons can be drawn from these dramatic reversals? Next, let's break down what these events reveal about the changing nature of power and perception in modern conflict. What can you actually learn from Russia's calm but forceful handling of crisis? In moments when the world expected outrage, Russian leaders chose method over hysteria, responding to the failed Crimean Bridge attack with precision and discipline. This choice didn't just prevent panic, it shifted the entire psychological balance of the confrontation. Instead of letting the bridge become a symbol of vulnerability, Moscow transformed it into a global sign of stability. The fact that it stood, undamaged, sent a clear message. Attacks may come, but Russia's defenses and resolve remain unbroken. This narrative quickly overtook the headlines, pushing back against attempts to paint the country as destabilized or weak. While Western media and Ukrainian channels tried to frame the incident as a blow to Russian security, the reality was the opposite. Moscow managed the flow of information tightly, projecting confidence and issuing measured, direct warnings. The world watched as NATO's leadership hesitated, forced into retreat by the mere threat of further escalation. France, once vocal, was suddenly scrambling to explain its own role, and even its allies were caught flat-footed. What's the lesson here? In global confrontations, it's often the calm, calculated actions taken behind closed doors, not loud statements or public outrage, that decide who controls the outcome. By keeping control of its own narrative, Russia exposed the vulnerability in its opponent's messaging. Those who failed to match this discipline found themselves losing both initiative and credibility, changing the rules of engagement almost overnight. So, standing at the edge of a new phase, what does this mean for the future? The aftermath of the bridge attack forces us to rethink how power, perception, and response will shape the next moves in this conflict. When the world expects shock and awe, what truly stuns is restraint. The failed attack on the Crimean Bridge was supposed to send tremors through Russia, but instead, it became a lesson in the quiet assertion of power. Rather than answering chaos with chaos, Russia responded with carefully measured, decisive actions. No bluster, just results. As news of the incident rippled outward, Western leaders braced for fiery rhetoric. But what they encountered was a calm, unwavering message. Russia would no longer be confined by old boundaries if threats came from afar. This cool posture forced hurried strategy meetings from Paris to Brussels, exposing anxieties and fractures among NATO members. French officials, previously certain of their footing, now found themselves questioning every move and motive. In the aftermath, it became clear that the greatest shock was not the explosion itself, but the swiftness with which Russia seized the narrative. Suddenly, the attacker was on the defensive, while the intended victim set the tempo. In Crimea, daily life resumed almost instantly, not because of brute military dominance, but because of the confidence projected through decisive, disciplined action. The real power in international conflict often lies beneath the surface. It is not always in the headlines, but in the subtle shifts, when restraint and resolve replace threats and spectacle. If we focus only on dramatic events or loud pronouncements, we risk being manipulated, missing how the true balance of power quietly tips behind closed doors. This incident invites us all to rethink how we interpret global events. The next time a crisis unfolds, ask yourself, is the loudest voice really in control, or is the quietest hand moving the pieces?